Let me tell you something that may sting a little bit, but it's going to change your life if you let it. Consistency is a covenant, not a convenience. When people start something new, a business, a fitness routine, a spiritual journey, they often start with excitement. That adrenaline rush makes the first few steps feel easy. But as soon as the emotions wear off, they start negotiating with the commitment they made. That's because they treated their decision like a convenience, not a covenant. A covenant is a binding agreement, not just between you and your goal, but between you and your future, between you and the assignment God gave you. Convenience is optional, a covenant is sacred. When you tell yourself you're going to do something and you don't, you're not just breaking a schedule, you're breaking trust with yourself. And worse, you're signaling to your subconscious that your words have no weight. See, your brain listens to you. If you say you're going to wake up early and then you hit snooze 5 times, your mind starts building an identity around inconsistency. And once your identity gets tied to quitting, you begin to repeat the pattern even when the stakes are high. You start believing the lie that you're just not a consistent person. But you were never created to be inconsistent. You've just been practicing inconsistency for too long. When you view consistency as a covenant, you elevate your behavior. You don't need external motivation when you've made an internal decision. You stop showing up based on your feelings and start showing up based on your values, as it helps us. That's the difference between people who succeed and people who stay stuck. It's not the level of opportunity, it's the level of responsibility. Convenience says, if I feel good, I'll go to the gym. Covenant says, this is who I am, so I train. Convenience says, I'll work on the business when life calms down. Covenant says, God gave me this vision, so I work even in the storm. A people break promises to themselves all the time because they don't understand the cost of inconsistency. Every time you abandon a commitment, you delay your own destiny. You're asking God for breakthrough, but you're breaking away from the process that leads to it. You can't sow on Monday, skip the field Tuesday through Friday, and then expect a harvest on Saturday. Faithfulness in the small things is what brings fruit in the big things. And faithfulness requires consistency. It's not flashy. It's not fun all the time, but it's foundational. Convenience lives on the surface. Covenant digs deep. Covenant anchors you in purpose when convenience tries to drift you into distraction. The world will constantly offer you exits from your calling. It will tell you there's an easier way, a quicker way, a more popular way. But if you let convenience make your choices, you'll always take detours that delay your development. Covenant keeps you aligned. It reminds you that you didn't start this for applause. You started it for impact. You started because something in your spirit said, I was made for more. You don't keep going because it's easy. You keep going because you've decided in advance that quitting is no longer an option. When you make consistency a covenant, you don't need to see results right away to stay faithful. You know that some seeds take time to break the surface. And while you're waiting, you keep watering. You keep showing up. You keep sowing. Because covenant doesn't consult the calendar. It obeys the calling. Look at the people you admire, the ones whose lives bear fruit. It's not that they had fewer obstacles. It's not that they had more talent. It's that they made a decision and didn't negotiate with it. They treated their goals like non-negotiables. They understood that greatness doesn't show up where there's preference. It shows up where there's principle. Convenience asks, how do I feel? Covenant asks, what did I say I would do? And there's power in doing what you said you would do, especially when no one's watching. The real growth happens after the emotion wears off. That's when consistency gets tested. That's when your mind starts offering you reasons to stop. You're tired. It's not working. No one sees you. That's when you have to remember your why. That's when you have to remind yourself, I made a covenant. Because you're not just building habits, you're building history. You're building a legacy. You're proving to yourself that you can be trusted with vision. And until you honor your own word, how can you expect others to trust you with theirs? Discipline is doing it when you don't feel it. That's the real separator between people who live in purpose and people who live in patterns. Everybody wants success, but very few are willing to show up on the days when success doesn't feel exciting, the days when there's no crowd cheering you on, the days when progress feels invisible. But discipline doesn't check the emotional weather before it moves, as it helps us. Discipline gets up and does the work regardless of what the flesh is saying. It understands that feelings are fleeting, but fruit is faithful. And if you keep sowing in obedience, the harvest will eventually appear, whether it takes days, weeks, or years. The culture glorifies motivation. Social media is flooded with highlight reels and catchy phrases that make us want to move for 5 minutes. But discipline isn't loud, helps us. Discipline is quiet. It's the early mornings no one sees. It's the repetition no one applauds. It's the grind you keep showing up for when inspiration has long dried up. Discipline is the voice inside you that says, I said I would, when everything else in you says, let's skip today. It's the choice to act in alignment with your values even when your feelings are nowhere to be found. And if you wait for passion to do what requires principle, you'll spend your life chasing momentum instead of building it. There are always going to be distractions. Life doesn't slow down just because you have goals. Your body will feel tired. Your mind will tell you're not ready. Circumstances will line up to offer you perfectly valid excuses to delay the work. And if you need things to feel perfect before you start, you'll never begin. But discipline is the mechanism that moves you forward even when everything around you is pulling you sideways. It's how you build momentum from nothing. It's how you teach your body and mind that they follow your spirit, not the other way around. People talk about waiting for the right time, but discipline understands that the right time is now. Discipline says, start where you are with what you have and who you are right now. It doesn't need the stars to align. It doesn't need ideal conditions. Discipline about obedience in the dry season when the soil is hard and the clouds look empty, because that's when faith is tested. That's when preparation happens. That's when your roots grow deeper. Even if the fruit hasn't shown up yet, there are days when waking up and doing the work will feel like war. A war against comfort, a war against apathy, a war against excuses dressed as logic. And in those moments, discipline is your weapon. It reminds you of what you're building. It reminds you that emotions are not your compass. Your convictions are. Discipline doesn't need applause to stay motivated. It doesn't need an audience to stay faithful. It just needs a decision made once but honored daily. Because every time you show up, even when it's hard, you reinforce the truth. You are not controlled by how you feel. You are led by who you are. Too many people wait for a burst of energy, for some kind of supernatural push to act. But discipline understands that motion creates emotion. You move first, then the feelings follow. Not the other way around. You read the book even when your mind is tired. You make the call even when fear is loud. You keep the promise to yourself even when no one else is looking. Because discipline isn't about who's watching. It's about who you're becoming. And the person you're becoming is shaped more in the mundane than in the moments of hype. Discipline also builds confidence, not the kind of confidence that comes from compliments or external validation, but the kind that comes from keeping your own word. When you do what you said you'd do over and over, especially when you didn't want something shifts inside you, you begin to trust yourself. You begin to walk differently. You stop needing permission from the world because you've already given it to yourself. Discipline tells you we don't flinch when it's hard. We lean in, we push through, we rise up. You don't need another motivational video. You don't need someone to hype you up every morning. What you need is to master your internal world to the point where you show up because it's who you are, not just because you're in the mood. Discipline is what carries you when motivation takes a day off, and motivation will take many days off. That's why it can never be your engine. Your engine must be principle, not preference. Conviction, not convenience. And once you understand that your excuses lose their power, your distractions lose their pull, and your results start to compound, not because you worked harder once, but because you worked steadily regardless of how you felt. Don't wait for inspiration. Command it. Most people spend their lives sitting at the bus stop of motivation, waiting for the right wave of emotion to sweep them into action. They say things like, I just don't feel it today, or I'll get started when I'm in the mood. But inspiration was never designed to be a master. It was meant to follow action, not precede it. You don't sit around hoping the right moment shows up. You get up, move, speak, act, and create the moment. Inspiration doesn't respond to hesitation. It responds to motion. You stir it by starting. You pull it into your world through commitment and command. The world teaches people to react to their environment. If the mood is right, move. If the music is perfect, dance. If people support you, act. But that's a passive way of living. That means your life is always waiting for permission from something external. Real power comes when you decide to become the thermostat instead of the thermometer. A thermometer just reflects the temperature. A thermostat sets it. You are not here to measure the atmosphere. You're here to shift it. You don't walk into a room and wait for energy. You bring the energy. You don't start your business only when conditions are favorable. You show up with vision and direction and bend the environment to your will. Every great creator, every leader, every world changer had days where they didn't feel inspired, but they learned to create anyway. They understood that inspiration is not magic. It's discipline in disguise. It's the reward for being willing to show up when your emotions are flat. Your motivation is silent, and your circumstances are uncomfortable. When you act in the absence of feeling, you begin to rewire your identity. You're no longer at the mercy of your mood. You become a person who makes things happen. And that kind of person doesn't wait for a spark. They strike the match. Inspiration responds to authority. When you speak with power, when you make decisions with intention, you invite clarity. Too many people are waiting for clarity before they commit. But the opposite is true. You commit first, then clarity shows up. You move forward, and the path appears. You speak life into your situation, even when it looks like death. You say, I will win. You say, I'm built for this. You don't say it once and hope it sticks. You say it until your soul believes it. Your words are not just noise. They're instructions. And your body, your mind, your emotions, They follow orders when you give them with conviction. Waiting for inspiration creates inconsistency. One day you're on fire, and the next day you're cold because you let feelings run the schedule. But when you command inspiration, you build consistency. And consistency builds confidence. You start to trust that no matter what the day feels like, you're still going to produce. That kind of inner trust is more valuable than any fleeting burst of motivation. It means you're not driven by hype. You're driven by purpose. You don't move because it's easy. You move because it's necessary. The power to create is always inside of you. It's not somewhere out there in a quote, a video, a podcast, or a song. Those things can add fuel, but they are not the fire. The fire is your decision. The fire is your declaration. When you get up and move in the face of resistance, you prove to yourself that inspiration is not a prerequisite, it's a byproduct. And the more often you show up without waiting for it, the faster it comes. The more you produce without needing a good mood, the more your creativity flows on demand. People who succeed in business, in relationships, in life, they all have one thing in common: they stopped waiting. They stopped needing everything to be aligned before they got serious. They took control of their state. They learned to flip the switch mentally, spiritually, emotionally. And that switch is not reserved for the chosen few. It's not only available to the naturally driven. It's available to anyone who is willing to step up and take full responsibility for their life. You speak to your soul, not in reaction to circumstances, but in authority over them. You say, this is what we're doing today. You don't need to feel ready. You need to decide that you're done waiting. The longer you wait for inspiration to give you permission, the longer you delay your breakthrough. But the moment you understand that you were created to initiate, not imitate, everything begins to shift. You were never meant to be passive in your calling. You were meant to wake up every day with power, with authority, with the ability to command the atmosphere around you. When you grasp that, when you live from that place, you won't need someone else to light a fire under you. You'll realize the fire was inside you the whole time. Your identity fuels your consistency. Who you believe you are is the engine behind what you do. Behavior doesn't flow from effort alone. It flows from identity. When you see yourself as someone who follows through, you do. When you see yourself as disciplined, you act disciplined. But if deep down you view yourself as someone who quits, someone who doesn't finish, someone who's inconsistent, as it helps us, then that belief will sabotage you no matter how many motivational videos you watch or how many goals you write down. Because actions are temporary unless they are anchored to who you believe you are. Most people are trying to change their lives by changing their habits, but they never shift their identity. They say things like, I'm trying to be consistent, or I'm hoping I can stay focused. And they don't realize those words are rooted in doubt. You cannot become what you don't believe you are. You can't act consistently in ways that contradict your core identity. If you've always told yourself, I'm just not a disciplined person, then even when you try to act disciplined, your subconscious is looking for ways to prove yourself right. You'll miss a day, and instead of bouncing back, you'll say, see, I knew I couldn't stick with it. That's not a discipline issue. That's an identity issue. Change happens when you stop trying to achieve goals with the identity of your past. You cannot build a new future wearing the label of your old self. You must begin to say, this is who I am now, not someday, not when I get more confident, not after I reach a milestone. Now, you speak it before you see it. You declare it before it's obvious. That's how you rewire the way you think. You have to believe that your new identity is already yours and that your actions are just catching up to that truth. When you say, I am a consistent person, even if you haven't been before, you're giving your mind new instructions to follow. And over time, your behavior begins to align. Your brain is always working to stay congruent with your identity. If you believe you're lazy, you'll look for ways to reinforce that. If you believe you're inconsistent, you'll subconsciously find reasons to skip the work. But if you declare, I am disciplined, I am focused, I finish what I start, your mind begins to find ways to support that identity. You start making different decisions, not because someone's forcing you, but because it no longer feels right to betray who you say you are. Identity sets the standard. It builds a boundary. When your identity shifts, inconsistency feels like a violation instead of a habit. The real key to transformation is not motivation. It's identity alignment. You don't have to convince someone to act like a leader if they already see themselves as one. You don't have to beg someone to be committed if commitment is who they are. When you build your identity around the vision you're pursuing, the vision starts pulling you. You stop dragging yourself to do the work. You stop relying on hype to keep going. Your consistency becomes automatic because it's a natural expression of how you see yourself. Too many people are trying to act like something they don't believe they are. They grind for a few days, but the moment things get hard, they default back to their old identity. That's why lasting change starts from the inside. You have to spend time redefining yourself as it helps us. That means rejecting the labels other people gave you. It means replacing the story you've been telling yourself for years. Maybe someone told you were a quitter. Maybe you failed a few times and wore that failure like a name tag. But none of that defines you unless you let it. Your past behavior is not your identity. It's just a record of how you acted when you didn't know who you really were. You need to rehearse the identity of who you are becoming. Not in private only, but in how you speak, how you walk, how you carry yourself. You speak to yourself with authority. I am consistent. I show up. I do what needs to be done whether I feel like it or not. You build rituals that reflect that identity. You set goals that stretch that identity. You take actions every day that reinforce it. And when you slip, you don't let it redefine you. You remind yourself, this is who I am, so I return. Consistency becomes your baseline because anything less feels foreign. It no longer makes sense to quit. Not because you're trying harder, but because you're someone new. The power to stay consistent lives in your identity, not in your feelings, not in your circumstances, as it helps us. You don't wait until you feel worthy to act consistently. You act consistently until your actions affirm the worth that was already in you. Small steps done daily are more powerful than big moves done occasionally. That's the truth most people overlook. Everyone wants the big win, the viral moment, the overnight breakthrough, but the real transformation happens in the mundane. It's not in the explosion, it's in the repetition. What you do over and over again, even when it feels small, stacks over time. The compound effect is always in motion. It's either working for you or against you. And the difference isn't in intensity, it's in consistency. Because intensity creates a spark, but consistency builds the fire. When you brush your teeth, you don't do it for hours once a month. You do it for a couple minutes every day. Why? Because it's the regular repetition that keeps things healthy. Success is the same. It helps us. You don't need to do extraordinary things once in a while. You need to do the ordinary things with excellence every day. as it helps us. The phone calls you make even when one answers. It's the workouts you complete even when you're not seeing results. It's the reading you do even when your mind feels tired. Each action on its own may look small, but over time it becomes undeniable. People will call it luck, but it's not luck. It's consistency that's been compounding behind the scenes. The reason most people don't see results is because they quit too soon. They dig for gold for a few days, then walk away because they haven't seen anything shine. But the process doesn't reward the impatient. The process rewards the persistent. You have to outlast the silence. You have to show up when it feels like nothing is happening, because that's when everything is being built. The root grows before the fruit shows. And if you walk away too early, you'll miss the season you were sowing for. Every time you show up, even when it feels invisible, you are reinforcing the foundation that holds up the future version of you. You don't need to make a massive leap. You need to make a committed step, just one, and then another. Momentum doesn't come from motion once. It comes from motion again and again. It's not about how far you can leap. It's about how long you can walk. Most people burn out because they try to sprint their way to results. But those who win understand it's a marathon. They pace themselves. They stay steady. They're not in love with the result. They're in love with the process. Because when you fall in love with the process, you never fall out of momentum. You just keep building. The enemy of consistency is not failure. It's impatience. People get discouraged when the results don't match the effort right away. But harvest never comes in the same season as sowing. You have to keep watering when nothing is sprouting. You have to keep showing up when the outcome hasn't arrived, because every step is a deposit, every rep is a seed, and every habit is a builder of identity. What looks like slow progress is actually deep preparation. And when the breakthrough finally comes, it won't be because of one big move. It'll be the tipping point of all your daily deposits colliding into visible results. One of the most powerful decisions you can make is to stop chasing perfection and start honoring consistency. Perfection says, do it perfectly or don't do it at all. Consistency says, do what you can and keep doing it. Perfection paralyzes. Consistency mobilizes. You don't need the perfect plan to take action. You just need a commitment to not quit, because consistency doesn't ask, did you do it flawlessly? It asks, did you show up again today? The person who shows up daily, even with imperfections, will always outperform the person who only shows up when everything feels ideal. Daily disciplines shape long-term destinies. What you do every day is who you become. It's not just about getting something done. It's about becoming someone new. Each small step is not just a task, it's a declaration. You are telling your future, I'm coming for you. And with every consistent move, you are building the kind of resilience that can't be bought or borrowed. It can only be built through repetition. It's forged in the fire of daily choices. You become strong not by lifting once, but by lifting again and again, especially when it's heavy, especially when it's hard, especially when no one's watching. People will eventually see your results, but they won't see the mornings you pushed through, as they won't see the nights you stayed consistent when quitting felt easier. But that's where greatness is built, in the invisible places, in the uncelebrated hours, in the private disciplines. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. And your systems are shaped by what you choose to do daily. Your greatest transformation isn't waiting at the finish line. It's being formed in every consistent step along the way.